The new Barbie movie's sole purpose is to brainwash women into hating men.
This movie is the slickest, most visually appealing, and therefore most insidious packaging of feminist cliches and trans grooming that you have ever seen.
One of Barbie's main 3 sidekicks is, surprise, surprise, a man. I mean, is nothing sacred?
Why won't they let our little girls have anything?
Y'all, people are big mad about Barbie. From diatribes on YouTube to rants on TikTok to angry online reviews claiming it's an alienating, dangerous, and perverse film, the feminist agenda will kill us all, and a crowd favorite, they won't stop until we're all gay. That Ben Shapiro would pay his money to go and see the film and then spend 45 minutes ranting about it and literally setting Barbies on fire like a 12-year-old boy speaks to the power of this film. That he would criticize the movie for unironically using the word patriarchy more than 10 times speaks to why people, conservatives specifically, are so big mad about this film. Because when you insert certain buzzwords, it's sure to get conservatives riled up. And the second they hear a word like patriarchy, they'll dismiss the entire thing and hear whatever they want to hear instead of actually shutting the fuck up and learning. Or, for fuck's sake, just having a nice, fun time at a movie that's mainly meant to be fun and goofy because it's the summer and we're just trying to have fun around here. Why do you guys have to be such fucking creeps about everything? Ew. Luckily, I'm at a point in my life where I am long past anger at people who hate feminism and think the patriarchy is a fake concept meant to pit men and women against each other. No. The searing hate of my early 20s has faded to a detached curiosity. Why are you people like this? Why does the simple utterance of the word patriarchy send so many people into a blind rage to the point that they would publicly humiliate themselves on the internet about it? Yes, I'm still talking about Ben Shapiro. Holy fuck, that guy's an idiot. So I went digging and found it to be, as usual, an incredibly complex subject that involves everything from incel chat rooms to, you guessed it, Ronald fucking Reagan. This is why conservatives hate feminism. Roll the intro. To me, feminism is all about freedom of choice, to choose whatever you want, whenever you want. And a huge part of that is hair removal, or non-removal. You do you. And if you're into hair removal, then you'll definitely want to check out my partner on today's video, 𝗫𝗧. Waxing, shaving, hair removal, it's generally all a pain in the neck and it takes forever. I always forget or I can't be bothered, which is why I love 𝗫𝗧's IPL handset. It's a super easy to use at-home treatment with guaranteed results, and you can get an amazing discount if you use my link in the description. The 𝗫𝗧 IPL handset uses different wavelengths to target various skin conditions that help reduce acne, hair growth, or age spots, and promote skin rejuvenation. You can start to see results as fast as 2 to 3 weeks and full results in 12 weeks. I've been using 𝗫𝗧 for a few weeks now, and I'm already noticing that my hair is growing back slower and thinner, and it makes my skin super soft. I've been using it on my legs, underarms, bikini line, and I am thrilled to have 𝗫𝗧 so I don't have to think about hair removal anymore. The IPL handset is super sleek and ergonomic, it's easy to use. My favorite part is the continuous mode where you hold down the button for a few seconds and then it starts pulsing the light on its own, making the whole process really smooth and easy. The package comes with a quick start guide, so it's not intimidating to get started with, and the super long power cord means that you can use it anywhere and never run out of battery. Plus, it comes with a 12-month warranty and a 90-day money-back guarantee, so you can try it out risk-free. Plus, 𝗫𝗧 has amazing offers that make this device more accessible, including payment plans on the website. You can buy the device with 1 or 3 attachments that target different areas depending on your needs. IPL means intense pulsed light, and the light is broad spectrum to treat a wider area faster. The light is non-radiating, convenient, safe, and efficient. It converts light energy to heat to treat each area, but it doesn't hurt at all. I really like 𝗫𝗧 for hair removal because I've tried pretty much everything else. Shaving leads to razor burns and ingrown hairs and requires a ton of upkeep. Waxing's just an awful experience. I always go in there so nervous and I sweat through the little paper thing that they use on the waxing bed, not to mention it's inconvenient and pricey. Not for me. Plucking is medieval torture, using a cream hair remover is stinky and gross. The handset is the way to go. It's not painful and it works. Like I said, it's super easy to use. You just plug it in, turn it on, select your intensity depending on what the guidebook says, and press the button to flash. Again, I really like the glide mode where you just hold down the button for 5 seconds and then it starts continually pulsing. Super easy. You can see results in as little as 2 weeks with full results in 12 weeks. I have a discount just for my viewers. You can save 20% using my code Leeja20. Go to my link below or kenzie.com, which is KENZZI.com, and use my code Leeja20 and you'll save 20% on the device. If you try it out, I would love to hear about your results. Comment that down below. Thanks, Kenzie. I think looking at the general reactions from conservatives about the Barbie movie is a telling place to start in our exploration of why conservatives hate feminism. Because on its surface, Barbie is really a basic feminist primer, something for people who have maybe heard the word but never learned what it meant. To be clear, the word feminism doesn't have one clear definition, and it's far more complicated than the Barbie movie expressed. But I'm talking basic feminism 101, which honestly, for a lot of this country, is exactly where we need to start. It lays out the expectations that women have to face and the contradictions in those expectations that make perfection actually impossible, how exhausting it is to exist in this space, and how the patriarchy has resulted in a world where men pretty much exclusively make all the decisions, with a few notable but few exceptions. And despite men having wielded the vast majority of the power for all of human history, men are also suffering under this system because it's rigid and doesn't allow for genuine human expression or imperfection, no matter your gender. And I think it accurately portrays how someone would go about learning that this system even exists. Barbie has a sheltered, childlike wonder about the world, much like the kids who play with her would. So uncovering that this system exists is a shock for both her and her childlike counterpart Ken, and leads to very black and white, childlike thinking about the idea, seeing it as a simple case of us versus them, men versus women. It isn't until Barbie meets an older, wiser woman, one who's seen it all, who's literally her creator, that she realizes the humanity in herself and in everyone, what it means to really be human. But much like Barbie and Ken discovering the patriarchy for the first time, conservatives have interpreted this movie with a childlike understanding of feminism, the patriarchy, humans, and the world at large. Piers Morgan lamented, "Why does empowering women have to be about trashing men?" Going on to say that the real world of the movie is one where men are in charge of everything and are largely despicable, Barbie is immediately objectified, Mattel is represented as a misogynist outfit with an all-male board of alpha dogs, which, first of all, I'm sorry, you think Will Ferrell acting like an idiot is representative of alpha dogs? But also, yes, the real world in the movie accurately depicts the experience of many people in the actual real world, where men are in charge of mostly everything and are sometimes despicable. And women, especially one who looks like Margot Robbie, are immediately objectified upon entering said real world. What weird fantasy world are you living in where that's not the case? According to Sarah Vine of the Daily Mail, Barbie is a deeply anti-man movie, an extension of all that TikTok feminism that paints any form of masculinity other than the most anodyne, ooh, big word, Sarah, as toxic and predatory, and frames women's liberation not as a movement based on achieving equality between the sexes, but as a cultural revenge vehicle designed to write men out of the story altogether. Every male character is either an idiot, a bigot, or a sad, rather pathetic loser. Right, it's a caricature of men. Did you go into the Barbie movie expecting a factual representation of human Barbies? There are many men who are idiots, bigots, and or sad, rather pathetic losers. The Barbie movie is holding a mirror up to that stereotype, and many women recognized men in their lives in those stereotypes. And I would frankly argue, as others have, that this movie is actually incredibly kind to men. It paints them as innocent, childlike idiots, as opposed to the conniving, violent men that many people deal with in the real world. Despite this movie being literally about Barbie, it's in the title, people, Ken and his story of self-discovery is surprisingly centered in this movie, in a way that women's typically aren't when they play supporting roles in male-driven films. Ken is given a redemption arc. Barbie sees him, finally, as human. She apologizes to him. When have you ever seen a film where a supporting female character has that experience? At the end of the film, while Barbie is in her fully formed human era when we're supposed to be basking in her realization as a fully formed woman, Ken is still centered. He's forgiven. His growth arc is happening alongside Barbie, which also personifies a central theme in the film, which is that we're human, that life is complicated and can't be simplified into platitudes and black and white thinking about men versus women. This film is, in fact, incredibly nice to men. If we wanted a revenge film, that would look very, very different. You're lucky we want equality and not revenge. A whole dissertation could and should be written on the conservative backlash to Barbie alone, but suffice it to say their understanding of the central themes of the film lacks so much depth that it would make any high school English teacher feel ashamed. Not one critical thinking synapse is firing in the conservative response to this film. But ultimately, that's not the point. The point in all of this is to rile people up, get likes and views and clicks, to glom onto a cultural moment to gain clout, all while reinforcing the idea that men and conservative values are under attack. They're the victims here. It stokes paranoia, which then fans the flames of the right moving ever further to the right. And this idea that feminism, or any cultural moment in which women have a prominent speaking role, God forbid, is a threat to the freedoms and traditions of real Americans is strong with Trump. See my video on the cult of Donald Trump, but it's also a message that has been recycled again and again by Republicans since the dawn of the Reagan era. In 1963, second wave feminism was underway. American feminist writer Betty Friedan published her wildly popular book, The Feminine Mystique, that same year. In it, she criticizes the separate sphere of motherhood and homemaking that women are relegated to, while men are able to flourish in the male sphere of work, politics, and power. That same year, in 1963, JFK signed the Equal Pay Act into law, making it illegal to pay women less than men for doing comparable work at the same job. Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 prevented employers from discriminating against employees based on race, religion, sex, or national origin. And in 1965, Griswold v. Connecticut came down at the Supreme Court, finding that access to contraception was a right guaranteed by the Constitution. By 1972, less than a decade after Betty Friedan said women should break out of their traditional sphere into the spheres typically reserved for men, Gloria Steinem joined Friedan and other activists, including Congresswomen Bella Abzug and Shirley Chisholm, to form the National Women's Political Caucus to support gender equality and ensure women's representation in political office. That same year, 1972, the Equal Rights Amendment to the U.S. Constitution passed in Congress. It had been introduced nearly 50 years earlier. And it didn't just pass, it passed with flying colors. The ERA received broad, bipartisan support in both the House and the Senate. In the House, it was voted in 354 to 24. In the Senate, 84 to 8. The support was so broad and so bipartisan that many assumed that its ratification in the states was a foregone conclusion. As a reminder, for a constitutional amendment to pass, it must first be passed by Congress and then sent to the states for ratification. 3/4 of the states must ratify the amendment for it to be added to the Constitution. The reason for this widespread support of the ERA was because it was seen, correctly, as simply something that would ensure equal opportunities for women should they choose to pursue them. The amendment literally just says, equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. It then grants Congress the power to enforce the amendment and says it will take effect 2 years after the date of ratification. That's it. The US and states can't deny or abridge equality of rights under the law on account of sex. But thanks to incredible PR over years, the ERA has been vilified as a radical attempt to inject the Constitution in the very fabric of the United States with hateful, unfair, dangerous feminazi ideas that threaten American traditions and family values. And who do we have to thank for that? Phyllis motherfucking Schlafly. And Reagan, of course, but we'll get to him. Phyllis Schlafly was a lawyer and political activist who threw herself behind the cause to stop the passage of the Equal Rights Amendment. In 1972, she organized the Stop ERA movement, using her political connections and a truly incredible PR campaign to shift the rhetoric around the ERA from supporting the general idea that women should have equal rights under the law to fear-mongering conservatives, especially other conservative women, into believing that the ERA would erode traditional American family values and would in fact hurt women and do away with the privileges they enjoyed, such as dependent wife Social Security income and not having to worry about getting drafted into the military. It would require women to put their children into government daycare and put themselves on the front lines in warfare. She used that popular right-wing tactic, fear, to depict feminism as this anti-American, untraditional mandate that would take over everyone's life and take away freedom of choice, presenting anti-feminism as the morally superior alternative. And when I say this woman was a master at what she was doing, the states had a 7-year window to ratify the ERA. 38 states were needed to hit that 3/4 of states requirement. In the first year, 30 states ratified the ERA. As Schlafly's numbers grew in number and her influence spread, she single-handedly managed to halt the progress of the ERA and even send it careening backward. In the remaining 6 years of the ratification window, only 5 more states ratified, and numerous states were so swayed by her rhetoric that they attempted to rescind their ratification. By the end of the 7-year window, the ERA was 3 states short of ratification. Even after an extension, the ERA still failed to pass. Schlafly's campaign was so spectacularly successful that even though she was just a silly little woman, other politicians began to take notice. Most notably, Ronald motherfucking Reagan. The ERA was failing miserably right around the time Ronnie was gearing up for the 1980 election, and he realized that being anti-feminist was politically advantageous. So despite 4 decades of GOP support for the ERA, once again, Phyllis managed to turn that boat around quickly. Reagan dropped the longtime pro-ERA platform plank and replaced it with one supporting an anti-abortion amendment to the Constitution. He wasn't explicitly anti-equality, he was just concerned that the ERA could really weaken the American family and diminish the special protections that women held so dear. And this especially appealed to Southern white women, the same women Schlafly so successfully organized, because Southern white culture had long been a stronghold of traditional gender norms. The Southern white woman was to be put on a pedestal, financially supported, protected from the hardships of public life, virtue intact. Poor and working class white women didn't necessarily have those protections, but they were certainly aspirational. As we've seen time and again, for those women, they united over their whiteness instead of coalescing around class or gender struggles, meaning that this utopia of protection for women and traditional family values that Schlafly loved to tout was only a reality for a small percentage of the women who followed her, but was nevertheless supported by the working white women who believed they were just temporarily embarrassed housewives. And as we've already discussed, see for example my video about how Ronald Reagan ruined everything, this marked the beginning of increased polarization between the right and left in this country that has only festered since then. And this polarization affects pretty much every major political issue, but the reverberations of Schlafly's anti-ERA campaign and obsession with traditional family values can still be heard on the right today, amplified by decades of morphing and growing into an outsized, mutated swamp monster with 18 heads, all screeching something different about feminazis and the patriarchy. This can be seen, for example, in Trump's former chief strategist, Steve Bannon's declaration that if you rolled out a guillotine, they'd chop off every set of balls in the room. Women are gonna take charge of society. The anti-patriarchy movement is going to undo 10,000 years of recorded history. Or Piers Morgan saying, immediately when I hear the word patriarchy, I think, here we go again, despite everything that's happened in the last 50 years. All men are awful unless proven otherwise. All women are downtrodden, oppressed, and if it weren't for men, women would rule the world. It's exhausting for me. Aw, Piercy Weesey, it's exhausting for you? That must be so hard for the baby. Also, yes, by default, women would rule the world if it weren't for men. But that's not the point of feminism or pointing out the patriarchy. The fear-mongering on the right loves to grab onto the idea that any movement towards progress is necessarily a movement against them. Like, because women want equality, that necessarily means we're against men. And that feeling of threat hides the true reality, which is that for the men who feel threatened by women's equality, a threat to the status quo is a threat to them, because the status quo makes them comfortable. And why is that? Oh yeah, because it serves them. And while we could go on and on about academic discourse around the right-wing blowback against feminism, etc., the reality is that this increased polarization between the left and right, between feminists and anti-feminists, is that we have demonized each other to the point that we mischaracterize the general beliefs of each side based on the loudest people in the media, which tend to be at either extreme, while moderates are less engaged and less loud. It's like when you read a review for a product online and get wildly different feedback, because the only people writing reviews are ones who think it was either the worst thing they've ever purchased or the best thing that's ever happened to them. And you miss out on the 95% of people who don't write a review because it was fine. So we have a country where people on the right think that the leftist feminists want to castrate men, kill them all, along with their subservient wives who don't conform to the feminist worldview, and take over the world, wiping our period blood on the walls as we go. And on the left, people think that everyone who identifies as conservative hates women, is a predator or an apologist for predators, wants to go back to the 50s where women were to be seen and not heard, cook and clean while also looking hot, keep their opinions to themselves, and further the white race by raising white babies. And while there are quite a few people who do think that way on both sides, that overlooks a wide swath of the population that doesn't really feel very strongly one way or the the other, or the population that might be in favor of equality or even open-minded to learning about how the patriarchy affects everyone in their lives, not just women, but instead are turned off by the rhetoric from the loudest people on the left who make it seem like the only way to be a feminist is to hate men. And those people, especially women who may be open-minded to learning about feminism and the patriarchy in a more casual, centrist way, are then pushed further to the right, because as usual, black and white thinking will be the death of us all. There are feminists who think that to want to be a housewife is inherently anti-feminist and who rail against women who want to take more traditional roles. And then those women don't feel represented in feminism because they want to get married and have babies and fill a more traditional gender role. And so they think, well, since I want this and since I don't hate men, then I must be anti-feminist. Those are the only options. As one article recently put it, conservative women cherish the flag and the cross. Feminists typically reject both. Their analyses of secondary issues like workplace discrimination thus fail to resonate. But these attitudinal differences do not explain visceral hatred. Anti-feminism must be understood as part of a larger ecosystem of ideological polarization, social segregation, and misperceptions. Media organizations and political machines that benefit from outrage and tribal conflict add fuel to this fire. And that can then be a slippery slope, especially with the creation of the internet, toward the increasingly popular world of the trad wife. Trad wife means traditional wife, and it's an internet term that has picked up in popularity since the pandemic. It's used proudly by women on the right who are filling the traditional roles of wife and mother and consider it a political statement to do so. They're often deeply Christian, often Christian nationalist, and concerned with doing things in a God-honoring way. They almost mockingly show off their housewifely lives, both to recruit and connect with other trad wives, but also to annoy feminists, who they assume, because of polarization, all believe that being a housewife is anti-feminist. Which is ironic, given the amount of cottagecore homesteading content that lefties love to consume. I think we have all collectively at some point daydreamed about going off-grid and living off the land and baking bread from scratch. But the intent behind each is different. For leftists, that desire is predicated on a desire to escape the status quo. For people on the right, that desire is predicated on a desire to go back to the status quo. And why wouldn't these women want to preserve the status quo? They're almost exclusively white women whose proximity to white men and the privileges and protections that come with it keep them invested in preserving the patriarchy and the status quo. For many, especially middle and upper class white women, the status quo isn't painful enough for them, and in fact does offer them the mystical protections that Phyllis Schlafly touted, in a way that it does not for women of color and poor women. Tradwives claim feminism has failed women, white women especially, because it's robbed us of the opportunity to have a male provider, a happy family, and a nice home. The Me Too movement is simply confirmation of the dangerous world that feminism has created. A world where men don't respect our femininity and fertility and feel free to assault and harass us. The ultimate victim-blaming narrative. We've made ourselves into sex objects as we're demanding too much equality. Because definitely back in the 50s, women weren't raped, abused, or taken advantage of. And this argument that feminism created the world we live in now is a convenient blanket argument so that anything bad that happens to women now is because of feminism, not in spite of it, as if before feminism we didn't have these problems. For example, I bought my own damn house. I'm the main breadwinner, and I wouldn't touch motherhood with a 10-foot fucking pole. But to anti-feminists, this is the fault of feminism, not a result of me having free will or two brain cells to rub together. I would be so much happier if I capitulated to the natural way of the world, where men are toxic by nature and my place is in the home with the children. Because there definitely weren't housewives going insane in the 50s, everyone was happy. There's another branch of conservative women who consider themselves to be conservative feminists, attempting to reclaim the word for white women on the right. Conservative feminists believe in traditional family structures, individual choice, small government, and capitalism. Many believe that men and women are inherently different, and while they deserve equal opportunities, that won't naturally lead to equal outcomes. They posit that the leftist feminist obsession with equal outcomes, like that women should hold equal power in Congress or on corporate boards or should receive raises and promotions at the same rate as men for similar work, ignores the fundamental nature of men and women, their different abilities, and their distinct preferences that lead to disproportionate outcomes. Basically, women choose to leave the workforce to have babies, they choose to prioritize other things over their jobs, they don't choose leadership roles the way that men do, and that's natural. And so by forcing equal outcomes, that means we're actually just giving women a leg up over men, saying you can make all these choices, but we're still gonna pay you the same as men who are working harder and doing more. It's the same argument against affirmative action. Well, the blacks are allowed into colleges now, isn't that enough? Ignoring the fact that a leg up is really just equalizing the playing field after centuries of oppression. You can't say, well, women are CEOs now, so the small number of female CEOs proves that most just choose not to be, when just 50 years ago there were 0 Fortune 500 female CEOs and women couldn't even hold their own credit cards. When you grow up in a world that prioritizes male risk-taking and considers men who lead to be demanding but fair, while girls are taught to be careful and worry about others, and women who lead are considered bossy and cutthroat, you can't tell me that whether or not a woman becomes CEO of a Fortune 500 company is a choice. We're dealing with centuries of culture, and to whittle that down to, well, we all have equal access now, so whatever's happening is just a consequence of nature, is a fucking cop-out. And what's wild is that the very women who espouse the virtues of patriarchy and who feel protected while in its clutches also experience some of the greatest of patriarchal wrath. A recent article by Professor Tracy Lanera points out this paradox of misogyny, especially against alt-right women. She explains that this misogyny takes on a paradoxical form. The better alt-right women propagandists promote hate, the greater the hostility they experience from their fellow racists and critics. The more submissive women alt-right members become, the harsher the impact of misogyny on them. For example, popular alt-right women propagandists like Lauren Southern frame the alt-right as supportive of women's interests and have grown massive followings online promoting the beliefs of the alt-right. But in becoming so successful and popular on their platforms, they open themselves up to far more hate from the very groups of men they're trying to promote. Because that level of visibility, the voice that having a large platform gives you, is antithetical to the expected gender norms that women are meant to conform to. Seen and not heard, submissive, deferring to men always. When alt-right men see women doing the opposite of that, it doesn't matter what they're saying. Because while white women will center their whiteness and the protection it provides at the expense of solidarity with women across racial lines, white alt-right men will center their maleness above any political solidarity they might have with a woman who isn't in her place. But even for women who are attempting to conform to the gender roles assigned to them, the paradox of misogyny explained by Professor Lanera rears its head. In her article, she frames this concept around a story of a woman who felt welcomed and safe when attending her first neo-Nazi picnic in Oregon, safe because of her righteous status as a white mother. Soon, however, the men began to take notice of her young daughters, with the leader of the neo-Nazi group requesting that she bring her 2 young daughters to his office so that he could, and I quote, put his eyes on 2 Aryan girls. So the paradox lies in the fact that right-wing women will be both misogynists and victims of misogyny. And nowhere is that paradox more clear than in the election of Donald Trump, because it somehow always comes back to that, doesn't it? In 2016, 52% of white women voted for Trump. Contrast that with the 92% of black women who voted for Hillary. In 2020, 4 years into the administration of a president who thinks it's fine to grab women by the pussy, somehow he gained support of more white women, winning 55% of their votes. As one article succinctly put it, white women can be more comfortable with their own subjugation because it is cushioned by the privilege of whiteness. When, against all logic, Trump actually improved his numbers with white women, there is no conclusion to be reached other than that these women decided the primacy of whiteness was worth trading their own autonomy, bodily or otherwise. And that truth brings forth another truth. As long as white women are willing to align with conservatives over their whiteness, as opposed to aligning with women over their gender, we will continue the infighting, because the history of feminist movements is a history of middle and upper class white women dominating the narrative and the objectives, forcing poor women and women of color and LGBTQ folks to fracture off and start their own movements. Much like the labor organizing I talked about in my video about unions, our division only makes us weaker. But our tendency to favor the aspect of our identity that has greatest proximity to power, our whiteness as white women, maleness for black men, etc., may be the recipe for our continued undoing. So what does this all have to do with answering the question, why do conservatives hate feminism? Because I want to center women in this discussion. Men are of course the problem as well, but pretending women don't reinforce their own subjugation would be to turn a blind eye to our power in the situation. I'm not victim blaming, I'm saying, in fact, that we hold the key to our own salvation if only we meaning white women, could all stop being pick-me girls and start having hard and honest conversations about how we can work together across race and class lines to actually make strides towards equality. That means true freedom, not just freedom of choice. That means freedom to choose a career and and then also be free from harassment while trying to reach the top. That means freedom to choose to be a stay-at-home mom, and then also be free from having to worry about your daughters getting harassed or assaulted, or be free from having gold digger accusations lobbed at you as well. And that ultimately is what the Barbie movie is about. In the end, Barbie world represents an imaginary, aspirational world where women genuinely get to choose to be anything they want, free from the oppression that comes with the world we currently live in. Like I said, a whole dissertation could be written about this subject, and one YouTube video simply can't cover it all, so sound off in the comments about all the stuff I missed. I know you will anyway. If you liked this video, you might also like my video about the cult of Donald Trump. Thank you to my Patreon supporters, including my newest patrons, and an extra special shout out to my multi-platinum patron, 𝗦𝗦𝗢𝗥𝗧𝗏. If you're interested in behind-the-scenes content, access to my research and show notes, content about my dog, and all sorts of other stuff, consider joining me over on Patreon today. Thanks so much for watching, have a good day, bye-bye!